Well, hello, and good evening to you all. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Dr. James McDonald Goodpasture. I do have to say I'm surprised to find myself among you good people tonight. You see, I shuffled off this earthly coil 140 years ago, when I myself was at the age of 49 years. You see, people do not tend to live as long as they do now, and no one knows that better than I, as I was a doctor by trade. As a matter of fact, I was one of the first doctors to locate here in Cookeville, Tennessee. When the original town lots were ready to sell, I purchased one of the first lots sold, immediately constructed my medical office building, which was a one-story building on the north side of the public square. This building was the first brick building in Cookeville and remained there until about 1938, when I understand V.R. Williams' Ben Franklin dime store was constructed on the site. Perhaps later on one of you could explain to me what exactly a dime store is. I was not raised in Cookeville, however I was brought up in the small village of Hillham, Tennessee, with my parents, John and Marjorie Goodpasture, along with my sister and 4 brothers. Yes, there was 6 of us. Folks tended towards larger families back then. As you see, they needed help on the farm. Also, the older children were of great usefulness, taking care of the younger ones. Fortunately, I was the second the youngest, so I didn't do much taking care of babies until my years as a physician. But I assure you, I more than made up for it during that time. I came to Cookeville when the decision was made to locate the small city to where it is now. Before the original town lots were ready to sell, my brother and I purchased land for my home at Washington Avenue and 1st Street, which joined the 40-acre tract that had been purchased to subsidize for the town of Cookeville. I constructed my home on this site. Built in the 1850s, this home is still standing, and it was, for quite a time, the home of my grandson's widow, Nita, Mrs. Eugene F. Jarrett, and is more widely known as the Jarrett House. Perhaps some of you visited there when it was Miss Nina's Christmas house. But way back at the time the home was constructed, no one lived on the adjacent 40-acre tract, which was soon to become this wonderful town of Cookeville, Tennessee. My home has a unique and varied history. Why, it was even a church once. Did you know that? Well, a church of sorts. Our congregation came from pioneering efforts of the Presbyterian ministers, who in 1867 organized the Cookeville Society of the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. Being a founding elder, along with Jesse Pendergrass, we conducted services once every 2 months at my home. Having lost our first church building to fire in 1891 and a windstorm in 1892, we faithfully rebuilt and dedicated the structure in 1894. Family was important to me and my lovely wife, Ola Arnold. We had 4 wonderful children, a son, John, and 3 daughters, Avo, Mary, and Sarah, who brought us endless joy as youth and into their adulthoods. My wife's family was deeply rooted in this area. Her grandparents were William Quarles and Ann Hobbs, who arrived here from Virginia in 1809. They purchased a piece of land known as White Plains as a landmark on the Old Walton Road, one of the earliest roads connecting Knoxville and Nashville at that time. Many weary travelers stopped at White Plains Inn for the night's rest and a bite to eat. As westward expansion grew, so did Quarles' little community. It was the first real trade center in the area. With much foresight, Quarles built a blacksmith shop, a general store, a school, a church, and a post office. They were the true pioneers of this area. Unfortunately, these buildings from the pioneer settlement no longer exist. But the 1840 antebellum house, built by his grandson, Stephen Decatur Burton, still sits there on the land today. Tradition has it that all 3 presidents from the glorious state of Tennessee drank from a well on the property at White Plains. They also say that Mark Twain visited White Plains when he was a boy. I have even heard that the existing home is haunted. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I'll weigh in on that. After all, who am I to talk about ghosts? Now, doctoring is not the same it was in the mid-1800s as it is today. Middle Tennessee was a hard place to live, and illnesses would run rampant. Many babies died before their first birthdays. Many others contracted terrible diseases that otherwise cut their lives short. My wife Ova and I were very fortunate that our children all lived well beyond us. It is such a tragedy for a parent to bury a child, a tragedy I witnessed time and time again in my professional life, yet one from which our family was somehow spared. Praise the Lord. Causes of death during mid-19th century were different than today as well. You might have heard of a person dying of consumption, which was tuberculosis, dysentery and inflammation of the intestines, mortification, which was gangrene, or apoplexy, a stroke. You have also might have contracted winter fever, which was simply ammonia, or summer complaint, which was food poisoning caused by improperly stored food, especially milk and meats. I'm very glad to have been told that an amazing invention called vaccinations have helped eradicate horrible diseases like measles, mumps, cholera, smallpox, tetanus, and polio that would have killed and maimed thousands of Tennesseans in my day. Thank you for coming out tonight and hearing a bit of my story, and the stories of others who came out to visit with you good folks this evening. As I've stated earlier, I've lain in this cemetery for 140 years and have heard many sad stories, more than I care to recall. Go tonight holding your loved ones close, as the most important thing I've learned in this life is indeed very short and precious. Good night to you all.